Hey there, guys and girls. Stuart Bell here, business coach and founder of Adoro Coaching Consulting, and I want to hit you up with another episode of the Finnovator. And this time, I'm going to share some content from the program again, where we dive into a topic which I can't understate the importance. It's about pricing. It's about your fee model. It's about what you charge to clients, how you present it, how it all works in the background. And look, to give you the precursor to this, for me, I always talk about pricing being a gateway topic. And what I mean by that is there are certain things when you get involved with them, they open the door to other things. And pricing is one of those things that once you start looking at pricing, it shines a light on everything from how you approach your first appointments, how you structure your service offers, your processes, your systems, who does what. It does everything from what your deliverables are, what your value proposition is, and so many different areas. Pricing is one of those topics that when I put together a plan for the year, and I have an approach to planning which I call domino planning, which is you aim to work on one project at a time, and therefore the decision making you need to make is which is the best project to start with. Which is usually the one that's going to get you the result you need at that point in time, but also often make later projects unnecessary. So for example, if you need more clients because you don't have profit and you do pricing, sometimes it solves the profitability issue, so the need to bring in more clients is reduced. And pricing, as I just showed you, is often one of those topics and those projects that kind of I want to start with. Not because it's quick, it's not quick. Although I think the way that I do it is probably a lot quicker than I've ever seen it done. I can build a fee model in about 90 minutes. But here's the thing. It's not because it's quick, but because it asks really important questions of the business. It identifies where issues are. And most importantly, sometimes it can make it very, very clear on what you need to do to solve some really pressing problems around profitability, around turnaround times, around what you do and what you don't do, around who does what. So hopefully this is useful and you get a lot out of it. Of course, if it's anything like my pricing, it's probably going to ask more questions. And if you wanted to get more answers, please head over to the website, adoro.com.au. There's a whole section on our blog which covers written stuff about pricing. I think we've even got a pricing guide that you can download from the site and a whole bunch of other things. Anyway, that's the precursor. Pricing for me, I love working on it because it is such an important part of getting the business model right. So I hope you get a lot out of this. I'll hand over now. Here we go. Today's session is the power of pricing. And pricing is a huge topic. In previous years, I've run pricing in a myriad of different ways. We've run it as a 3-week program. I've run it as a 4-week program. I've even run it as a 6-week program. And even after 6 weeks, I can tell you right now, for someone to wrap up pricing as a project and get it completed and done is incredibly difficult because in truth, any pricing project, in order to implement it, get it bedded down, really sort of work through some of the elements of it, and most importantly, unlock the return on investment that you're aiming for in order to make it a really important and really powerful project, it's going to take you 12 months. And I'm not talking about 12 months just focusing on pricing. I'm talking about an initial period of focus to get your pricing model right, line up everything around it, and then implement it across your entire business. But as you're going to see today, the power of getting this right, hence power of pricing, is really, really significant. And that's partly because pricing for me is what I call a gateway project. I often talk about this as being a gateway project. What I mean by gateway is it's an entry to other areas. And if I think about the areas and businesses I worked with recently or in the past, pricing asks so many different questions of your business. You start looking at pricing and suddenly you start asking questions about your new client engagement process. Is it as effective as it possibly can be? Are you introducing the right things at the right times? Are you got things out of order? It asks questions about your processes. It asks questions about your use of technology. It asks questions about what you're offering to clients on an ongoing basis. It will ask questions about how your team are involved in the process, how much you're delegating, how much you're taking on board. It will ask questions about whether you're working with the right clients, what the proposition is to those clients, and a host of other areas. In many ways, I've got to be honest, when I'm working with a business and I'm working through that domino project process, and in front of me, I've got a bunch of project options lined up, and one of them is pricing. I always like to spend an extra length of time asking the really important questions whether pricing is the one we should start with. Because whilst I think things like value proposition or getting your processes right or role definitions or getting your tech map sorted or any number of other things, new client engagement reviews, while these are all really strong projects to start off and projects that can get a really clear return on investment, pricing provides this incredible platform for really getting to the heart of what a business needs to do in order to be more profitable, more sustainable, in order to have the right people doing the right work, and ultimately to make sure that you're working with the right people and delivering what you need to do to them. It's a really phenomenal place to start. Now, within the context of the program, and this is kind of why I wanted to run this as the session in the style I'm going to run it today, we have a number of different modules on the program. And in fact, if you want to go hunting around in the back of the members site, if you typed in fast track, you're going to find that those recordings of our fast track programs that we run in previous years, where we work with businesses over a period of time, they're all there. So you would be able to see, if you wanted to, some of the outputs, some of the other decisions businesses have made about the way they charge and the mechanics of it and how they introduce it. It's all there. But if at the core of the program, when we sort of focused on one of the most important modules to make part of our core pricing module, you can see there were 6. There's one that's all about building out your fee model. There's one that's all about using our fee model tool. There's 2 in the middle here, which are about getting confident in how you present your fees and what you're talking about, as well as one that's all there about sort of the psychology of pricing, understanding how clients think about pricing, what the huge body of research on behavioral economics says about pricing, as well as how you might be thinking about what you are charging and how that might be not serving you. Because what pricing is one of those things that when you dive into it, it's got a lot to do with sometimes the way that you assess what you do, you can open yourself to a whole bunch of biases which tend to get in the way of you being able to charge what you need to, equally importantly, what you're worth. There's modules in there on how to launch a free model, and there's also modules there, importantly, on how to transition your business across. But I think rather than me going deep and trying to walk you through how to build a fee model in 60 minutes or, pull up the fee modeler and pulling that out, or try and summarize the huge body of research there is about psychology of pricing and what the main things that you need to do in order to be able to present fees confidently to new and existing clients. What I wanted to do is give you a bit of an overview of the whole process. And equally importantly, I wanted to sort of address some of those myths or the key principles that I think, whatever angle you're coming at from pricing, are really important to understand, and give you some key insights into where pricing is at right here and now. Now, if you have not done pricing before, if this is literally the first time that you've ever looked at pricing model as a practice and you've not gone through the process, then what this is going to give you is a really clear understanding of how to approach it, as well as some of the things to avoid. Because pricing is one of those things that I've seen it done many different ways, and there's a lot of ways of doing it that aren't going to produce the right outcome. So this is going to give you a sense of how I've structured myself in doing it. And to be honest, I feel that the work that I've done on pricing over the past 15, 16, 17 years has probably equipped me to understand the process better than probably 90% of consultants out there, and certainly better than consultants who haven't worked in advice specifically. But if you have done your pricing before, this is going to give you a sense of where things are at right now, because things have shifted. There's been a lot of change in the underlying cost and work, as well as consumer perceptions as well. And it's going to give you a sense of potentially where you might want to start, as well as it's going to give you a bit of a sense of if you are at that point in time where you are checking your processes again, or you're checking your pricing again, it'll give you a bit of a refresh on some key things. So I'm going to jump in, and if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat box. Hey, Lisa, how are you? Okay. Now, I didn't want to go through and give you a breakdown of every single practice pricing model out there, because again, that's going to take up too much time. But I wanted to give you a bit of a sense of the key insights that you can get from pricing. And by the way, there is a lead magnet which you can download on our website. I think you can get it on through the member site called the Advisor Pricing Guide. That was created, I think, about 1.5 years ago. So we've got to update it. But that's also a really good resource for giving you the high level of pricing and how to approach it and give you that. But I'm going to give you the key insights. This is a really important part, which is the first piece. At the end of last year, I went and saw Stephen Prendeville speak at one of the IFA Future Forum. And if you don't know Stephen, I'm actually going to be doing a masterclass with him towards the end of this year. And if you've never seen Stephen speak, you have to come along to this. If you have seen Stephen speak, then you will be coming along to it anyway, because you'll know how good he is. He's one of these people, as I said in the blurb, if he's the last person on a conference agenda, he's there for a reason, because he's the person that you will stay and see speak. He has been in the industry since the 80s. I believe he started out as a stockbroker, and then he was an advisor, I think the youngest investment advisor in Australia ever. And then he sort of went into dealer group land and headed up a dealer group, and then he was in asset management, and then I think he made sort of get into the business that he's best known for now, which is for the last 20 years plus, I think. He has been one of Australia's leading brokers of financial services firms, being involved in over 200 sales. And again, what I love about Stephen is the insights he gives. But this was an absolute pearler amongst others, where he talked about how the definition of a high-value practice has shifted over the past few years. And when I first started doing pricing in 2010, I would go in and I'd create these models based on, you know what, we'll put a 30% profit margin in there. Or if a practice wanted to push it up, we'll go to 40. Now, and this is Stephen's words, anything less than 50% profit margin in a practice, and it's generally seen as being a lower quality firm. Not low quality, but lower quality. In other words, it's shifted. And I think it's shifted a lot because there's a lot of margin for error now in terms of what you're pricing and what actually gets delivered, as well as the fact that the risks associated with advice firms, as well as the capacity, the resources and capacity needed to manage has increased. So this is generally saying if you're going through pricing and you're not pricing your profit at 40 to 50%, ideally starting at 50%, then what you're essentially doing is you're building a pricing model, which if someone like Stephen came in and he was going to put a valuation on your firm, that valuation would decrease because of that inbuilt profit margin. Another one that's really shifted is the second one here. When I first started pricing out new client engagement processes for firms, and this is, by the way, this is just looking at a new client engagement process and saying for an average standard, what we call a vanilla client, in other words, the most basic client that you'd work with, how long does it take you to take a client from first contact all the way through the first meeting, strategy, development, plan presentation, implementation to it's done? Most firms came into about the 10 to 20 hours mark. Now, generally, anybody under 20 hours, they're either incredibly efficient or potentially they're missing certain things. And it goes upwards from there. But generally, as I said, the average firm will take at least 20 hours to implement advice for a simple new client from the moment of first contact to the point the advice is implemented. That's going to be important a bit later on when I show you something else. As a rule of thumb, if I'm going in, I'm looking at a client's pricing model, I used to go in and say, hey, 3,000 is kind of the bottom. If any client is charging under 3,000 for their new client, new advice, there's a good chance they're sub-profitable. Now that number's at least 4,000, if not for some firms who are doing more 4.5. Again, if you're coming to this and your new client, your base fee for new advice is under that level, there's a good chance it might be an area to look at for your firm. Again, taking the same kind of concept and applying it to service models, I would suggest that most firms cannot deliver an active, ongoing service proposition to a client if it includes a review and it includes you working with them as an advisor for less than 2,500. And frankly, the moment you start adding in cash flow management work or managing a self-managed super fund or any kind of complex investments, direct equities, most definitely, anything which requires a certain amount of work or management during the year, that number will go up pretty clearly. So again, we'll talk a little in a second about what I call the long tail and the tall and the fat head. This is really, really important because it has by definition put pressure on firms to be able to service clients at that lower price point. Annual reviews are really interesting because I've always been of the view that annual reviews should be something that is something that's just as important as the experience in an initial appointment. And I know many of you who've worked with me on reviews have implemented something which is just excellent and something people were willing to pay for. To be frank, most businesses that have evolved their review over the last few years, who have upped their game, have done so, and they're looking at it as being very much an experience where they give clients that clarity of where they are, and they're setting the site for the journey ahead and what comes next. But when I cost those reviews in isolation, they usually come between $1,000 and $1,500 alone. Now, this is key. And by the way, it goes upwards from there. This is key because when you look at it, you realize that just that component of the offer costs that. It makes you kind of understand that why it's so difficult to deliver something which is active and ongoing for under that 2,500. Want to talk a bit about service models because, again, I mentioned pricing tends to be a gateway thing, and often the gateway leads to service propositions. And one of the biggest issues with the platinum, silver, gold service model, where you've got three service models, something for your top clients, something for most of your clients, then something for your lower cost clients. In practical delivery, when you jump in under the bonnet, you find out there's actually no differentiation in terms of what clients receive. Often there's no tracking of what clients receive differently, and there's no way for your team or the advisor to kind of stop or actively be aware that some clients might be getting services they're not paying for. I would say that most of the time, though, you'd be pretty aware when clients aren't receiving what they paid for. But it's the over delivery that's targeting. This is one I've taken aim at a lot in the last few years, and it's the fact that a lot of firms have come from a place where they had an all-inclusive service proposition. Once you come on board, we look after your affairs. But in many cases, what it doesn't take into account is when clients need new advice. They need not just a new ROA, not just a new SOA, but where the scope of the advice increases. And often what businesses will do is they will not charge for that advice. They won't charge for the production of the SOA. They won't charge for the additional implementation work that needs to happen. They won't charge for the additional data collection or any of that additional stuff. They will just provide the advice, and maybe they will see an increase in their ongoing revenue as such off the back of it. Sometimes firms will actively change the nature of the engagement. But here's the point. I would say around 60% of the firms who don't charge for existing clients for review and they go, we'll just absorb it, actually have no insight into how long it takes them to recover that sunk cost. And this is assuming that ongoing fee level is actually profitable already. So again, really important because, you might absorb some of those advice fees, but let's say, you are not recovering it until 4 years later. Because you're only making minor changes to the ongoing fees, and they don't take into account these additional advice pieces. Well, if you are providing a new advice every 3 years, it essentially means you're always chasing your tail, and you've got this inbuilt profit inefficiency in the business. Hey Sam, how you doing? This is really key. When I sit down and do pricing with firms, one of the most important functions of getting a team together to work through the fee modeler process is sometimes you get this wonderful discussion going where the advisor turns around and goes, well, I go, how long does it take to do this particular task, which is usually a back office task? And the advisor go, maybe 20 minutes. And you can just see the admin team or the practice manager will go, you what? And you get this discussion where you realize that people's perceptions of what things do take or should take or can take can sometimes be different. And that is one of the leading causes of profit inefficiencies, where there is a genuine lack of insight or understanding of what different things done by different roles actually take. And obviously, if the firm is underestimating what everybody does, then not only they're potentially undercharging, but they're impacting their capacity and also underappreciating what they're actually delivering. The second one is ignoring variations in advice. So where you've got a client who you're charging, two clients you're charging certain fees of, but one of them is really, really simple. And the other one might have a complex advice. There might be all this complexity, self-managed super fund. You're managing a really legacy insurance policies for them. You're doing cash flow work, that you're doing stuff that's out of scope. And essentially what means is you've got a client over here, which is simple, that you're hitting a profit margin, and then all the profits being eaten up in over delivering to this client where you've got complexity. But essentially, you're adding more value because you're helping them manage that complexity. I wanted to mention this one, which is around the final one here is about resetting fees. Because personally, I'm completely agnostic about the way that you recover your fees, whether you're a flat fee for service, whether you prefer asset-based, whether you're kind of halfway between the two. You're like a hybrid model, or you charge upfront a certain way and ongoing a certain fee. For me, as long as that pricing methodology or the mechanism of recovering the revenue is right for you, it's right for the client, and it's explained in a way that makes sense and is reasonable and all the rest of it, that's fine. But the most important thing for me, I don't care which way you choose, as long as it enables you to recover the revenue in your business that enables you to reinvest. But and again, if we were doing pricing, one of the exercises we would do is we would understand why you've chosen your method of recovering your fees, whether it's flat fees, asset-based, hybrid, and you would be able to understand the pros and the cons and ultimately explain why that is the methodology you've chosen to make an active decision. But when you have a fee-for-service thing, one of the biggest causes of lack of sustainability over time is when firms set a fee and they don't reset it, let alone have an increase for CPI. And essentially what that means is if you're not having regular conversations with your clients about their fees and you're not resetting or recalibrating, then what you're doing is you're ultimately creating a model that will become less and less sustainable, less profitable, and give you less capacity over time. So those are the main insights. There are plenty of others, but I wanted to give you, if you were to go across the state of pricing at this point in time, they would be the main points that I'd pay attention to. The other one, which I wanted to sketch this out, because for most practices, if I, when I go in and talk to them about pricing and I draw this diagram, I'd say 80% of the time, I'm explaining in some way, shape, or form the situation in their practice. And essentially, most firms, except for those who've really done, grown a certain way or focused on a certain clientele or a high net worth or whatever it is, or those who have acquisitions are actually like this, is if we look at your clients, and down here you've got sort of low fee paying clients, and up here you've got your top fee paying client. Most businesses, their pricing shape looks a bit like this line here, right? And which is normal. In other words, you've got the clients up here, lots of fees, the clients are low. Now, when we do the pricing, we'll uncover sort of two numbers. And in reality, if we were being really strict about it, and we were building service propositions, that would look a bit more like this, but we'll simplify it. This is what I call your target fee level. In other words, this is the fee that you should be charging a client who is you're working with a certain way, and this is your break even. And the issue is when you have a service model that looks like this, you're going to have some clients here who are profitable, yeah, and then you've got hyper profitable clients up here. But then somewhere in the business that you've got what we call sub-profitable, which are clients that are somewhere between 30 to 50%. And then you'll have clients down here which are just below break even. And typically what's happening in most cases is this kind of profit here is actually supporting this profit here. And when you go through the process and analyze it, that becomes really, really clear. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of people who have businesses. Maybe you've got long-serving clients, or maybe you've got clients who, because of certain circumstances, you retain them and you work with them, and maybe you don't increase your fees. But the issue has occurred over the past few years, is these two lines have slowly gone up as the cost of delivering advice has gone up. And usually, by the way, this one goes up more slowly than that. So without knowing it, a lot of firms have over time seen the number of sub-profitable, unprofitable clients being supported by profitable or hyper-profitable clients slowly increase. And of course, it becomes a bigger problem, if you have been unlucky at any point in time. If you've got at the top end, you've got one or two clients who are super profitable and they decide to move on, that can put a business under stress. So the goal really is always to try and increase this capacity to where at least you've got a shape that looks a bit more like that, ideally. And sometimes that can be exiting certain clients who don't meet your model. And sometimes it is introducing certain service proposition at that bottom end, which enable you to be profitable, but at a lower price point. A really important to look for thing is that profit gap. Cool. So that's sort of the high level. I want to give you a bit of a quick overview of the process. And again, if this is your first time doing pricing, then the process is going to give you an overview of what it looks like before you start. If you've done pricing before and you kind of want to double check you've done things correctly, or you're going back to do a second time, this will give you a high level overview. I'll go through it pretty quickly. The first step in any process is to kind of build your fee model. Go through, input the information, and get to a point really, really quickly where you have a general idea of what, based on your current business model, you would need to charge your new clients and your existing clients on an ongoing basis in order for you to hit your profit margins. Frankly, the easiest way to do this is to go to the fee modeler tool we built, feemodeler.com.au, log in, and you can work through this. And I think we built this tool maybe 6-7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. And in that time, I've used it to design many fee models, which are still in the system. And again, I've got firms who first built their fee model 7 years ago, and they've come back and tweaked it. And it's really interesting to see how things evolve over time. But however, let's say you say, well, I'd like to do that, but I also want to get a really clear sense of what I should be charging. And this is a really quick and dirty way of doing it. And it's really just about going through and working out, okay, so over here, what's your hourly rate? And again, if you go through and work out your hourly rate, which is usually the total cost of maintaining, I just got something in my eye, apologies, maintaining you as an employee over time divided by the percentage of your time that is recoverable, that generally gives it. But let's say you just turn around and go, well, you know what? My hourly rate roughly is $320 an hour. And again, if you've got a team behind you, you might want to come up with an average. And then I want you to work out how long it takes you to provide new advice. Let's say you are one of those firms who does it for 20 hours. Very quickly, as a rough guide, you can work out, based on you working 320 hours, for 20 hours, the total cost that you would need to charge in order to be profitable, hit your profit margins for advice is around 6,400. So again, you could bring that down by going, well, that's not all me doing it. That would be 10 hours of my team, and my team are, for argument's sake, let's say they're 160. Well, you'd find the midpoint between 160 and 320, which would be 220. And again, you can kind of see how it becomes quite malleable. 220 is down here. There we go. And again, you can bring it down quite quickly. So, but as a rough and ready thing, it's a good way for you to go through just armed with your hourly rate and the amount of time it takes you to do something and get a sense of whether you are on the money, way below, or there are certain things you can do. So again, building your fee model is the start of it all. Once you've built your fee model, I used to jump straight into the sort of fee analysis stuff, into some of the fee confidence and talk to people about how they present. Nowadays, I jump in to do a bit of analysis. And really, this is taking a bunch of data about your existing client base, all of the clients you've got, what they're paying you, how you're servicing them currently, and then applying this new model. And usually what happens, you input the information and you go through the process, and it will spit out two numbers. It will spit out the actual fee. It'll spit out a target fee. It'll tell you break even. And very quickly, it'll tell you what the gap is between it. And you'll find that there are certain clients that you're working with. For example, who's this one down here? That would be Alan Jones. Here we go. The actual fee he pays you 7.5. The total fee is 4,600, which means he's a great client. But often, similarly, what it will do is it'll point out that you have some clients along the way where there is a massive gap, and it's the gap which provides your uplift potential. And in this case, a really small sample set, you can see you've got a business here. Their target revenue should be 55,000 from the clients that are in there. The actual revenue is 34, which gives us a total upliftable revenue of $26,000. Again, if they were charging every single client on their books a minimum in this particular example, they would have a $56,000, just under $57,000 revenue. Now, this is really, really important because I was going to come here on with a bunch of case studies, but to be honest, I'll give you just a gist without going into some of the details. I can talk about one of the case studies I've spoken about a lot with James Williamson of Millhaven, where over the course of a 12-month period, we identified there was $140,000 profit gap in his business, and we managed to implement it all. He increased his ongoing revenue by $128,000, whilst only losing 5 clients from the total client base of 115. Yeah, so $128,000 profit gap he closed. I can talk about a practice on the program recently who I started working with based down in Melbourne. And I had a conversation off the cuff, and I asked them what their revenue was. I asked them, roughly what they were charging, and I pulled a number out of my hat. I was like, I think you guys have probably got a profit gap of 150,000. And they kind of looked at me and said, you know what? That's almost exactly the number. And sure enough, when we went and analyzed that number, it turned out to be a profit gap, I think 144,000. They managed to close that and bank $80,000 worth of that in the first 12 months. And they're well on their way to getting a lot of it now. And this wasn't money they were increasing their fees or they were taking. This was profit that, as a result of over delivering to those certain clients, or in many ways, they were providing a discount to their services to certain clients and not to others. They were able to unlock revenue that was otherwise they were compensating for in working longer hours, or not being able to afford to bring on board staff, or not being able to invest in software, or any of all the other things we do when we don't quite have enough to run the business or invest in the business we want. And by bringing that on board, they were able to not only sort of take the pressure off themselves and increase the revenue, but more importantly, they were able to get closer to building a business that did all the things they wanted it to do. So this analysis piece, when you've done that, you got your number, you plonk it in, you analyze what's going on. This gives you the target to aim for, not to mention these new clients. Let's keep going. Because as I said, I pulled out that number. when I was talking to the firm down in Melbourne, because generally speaking, the benchmark I use is most firms, if they're doing pricing for the first time, I can almost guarantee, give or take 5 to 7%, that firm is probably giving away 15% of their total profit margin due to mispricing. In other words, if they brought all of their clients up to their minimum level of fees, they would typically increase their revenue by 15%. And don't forget, when you increase your revenue by 15% on your existing business, you're not having to add more work or add more clients or add more hours. This is an increase in revenue purely based on what you're already doing. Really powerful stuff. Let's keep going. What am I doing that for? Once you have done that, you've analyzed, what typically happens is most firms tend to look at the model they've got. And again, once you've made that decision, okay, that's what my fees are. You've played with the numbers, you've played with the inputs. Your next goal is to go, okay, what can I improve? And a really good framework to use when you're looking at this is what I call the impact matrix. By the way, this is also a framework that I use with practices when we're assessing what software to implement. And it's based on the idea that when you're looking at your business, there's going to be a whole list of things you can do, a whole bunch of tech you can implement. But in this case, it is, okay, I've got 15 ways I want to improve my new client process. So there's 10 things I need to, that are not working for me, or taking up too much time, or they're too manual, or they're too inefficient. And the key thing is to categorize those according to two different criteria. The first is, what impact will implementing this have on the business? So you want to improve some element of your new client process. You want to implement a new fact-finding system. You want to create a new document that you can present to clients. You want to change the fact-finding process. It's taking too long to put together the presentation. And really, it's either this is going to have no major impact on your success. In other words, you look at this, it might look nicer, it might feel better, it might be have better diagrams, but it's not actually going to improve your fee levels, or it's not going to improve any of that sort of stuff. Versus at this top end, we've got stuff that you can measure the impact. That is going to increase the revenue. That's going to result in a quarter of the time to produce the documentation, versus how simple is this going to be to implement? In other words, is this something that you can implement in a week or less, and it's not going to disrupt the business, and there's not a lot of fuss in there? Or is it kind of challenging, and it might require many weeks and sufficient training? The rule of thumb is, if something's up here, you can change the process, you can implement it, and it's going to have an absolute impact. Bonza, wow, there you go. Impact. It's a no-brainer. Just get it done. File noting lives in here. There's a process that is basically you can adopt in a week. It is going to reduce the time taken to produce documentation file notes by a factor of 5. To be honest, if you've got a document, maybe there's a performance report that you produce for clients, and you put it out to clients, and it takes a bit of time to put it together. And when you look into it, you realize maybe 2 out of the 20 clients are reading it. And if you got rid of that, it wouldn't make any demonstrable impact. That is a no-brainer, okay? And sometimes, to be honest, a lot of these no-brainers are about removing things from your process, which you've always just done it that way. You do it because it puts polish on it, but it has actually no demonstrable impact. And by getting rid of it, you can save time. It's going to cost you less money, all that sort of stuff. So no-brainers, I love no-brainers. Over here, I guess the next bit is when you've got something which is can be addressed really, really quickly, but it's not going to have an impact. For me, these are distractions. And a lot of the things that practices want to tweak around their process, while they might be quick, we can get this done in a couple of days. It doesn't change anything. And the problem with tweaking a process is, even though you think you're tweaking it, sometimes there are knock-on impacts. You change something. Jen will talk about this, and you don't realize that you've also got to update the team, and then the team have got things that they have built this on, which suddenly don't work anymore. So again, if there's any, you go, this is really, really easy, but when you look at it, you go, but it's not going to have an impact. Maybe think twice before you go anywhere near it while you're optimizing your process. And then we've got stuff over here. Anything which is going to have a huge impact, but it's also a big project, take a backward step and realize these things are usually things that need to be planned out. They need to involve multiple members, and you need to have a good time frame on. And then finally, we've got stuff over here, which are things that are really challenging to implement, but don't necessarily have a big impact. That is when I would go out into the market and go, hold on, is there a way of doing this that either is going to be easier to implement, or I can actually get a demonstrable impact. And often by looking at it and scrapping certain things or swapping them out or just looking for better ways of doing it, that's where things come from. So again, if you're at that point where you've kind of analyzed the fees, you know what you need to change your process, and you're kind of going, okay, I've got 5 things I want to change. Take a step back and realize that some of these you might want to optimize straight away and change. Other things you might want to make a bit of a longer term goal. And in the meantime, get good at charging what you need to for your business to be successful now. Ultimately, it's all leading to a place where you launch your pricing model. And 80% of the time, 90% of the time, 80%, my suggestion is always launch with new clients. Don't go in and go, right, I know what my ongoing service model is. I'm going to transition my most expensive client, my most valuable client. We're going to get them across from our old service model to the new one, because you're going into it with no previous experience of pitching what you do. They already know what you did before, so they've got insight into what you were doing and how it worked before. Whereas if you go and work it with new clients, start by launching your upfront fee, change your process, the things you're going to do, work through all the explanations that you put together and how you present your fees and all of those things you do when you're preparing for launch, and you're doing it with a new client who has no prior expectations and no prior experience of working with you. 9 times out of 10, you get a better result. You build up your confidence. So by the time you come to transition to clients, you're already very adept at explaining your choices, explaining your reasons for change, explaining what's the benefits to them of this over the old way, answering any questions that come the way, and the transition ends up being really smooth. The final piece is kind of the bonus. And I mentioned at the beginning, this is partly to run people who haven't looked at this through high level, what it's all about in a short space of time. But if you're looking at coming back to this, maybe you haven't done it for a while, or you're resetting it. There are certain things that have changed in the market. Obviously, with the Royal Commission, with all that's happened, compliance legislation, licensees ramping up what's required, additional technology, some of it not always making things easier. Being able to revisit your pricing model, pull it up into a fee modeler tool like the fee modeler, and go through and go, okay, that's taking less, or that's taking longer. We've got another person on board, or I've delegated that out, and tweaking it is what's going to enable you to make sure that if your costs have gone up, you're aware of them, and you're not proceeding with a fee model based on an assumption that it's going to be that profit, that certain profitable at a certain profitable level, only to find out that because you forgot to take into account certain new things that have come along, you've ended up with a business that not only isn't as profitable as you like, but you've brought on board a whole bunch of clients who now you've got to transition at a much higher rate. But similarly, if you have a business where you've built your pricing on a certain level and you have implemented certain ways of doing things which will enable you to reduce the cost, your technology's come in, you've maybe outsourced or delegated or done all of these sort of things, it will give you the opportunity to see that you've actually built a business model that is getting more profitable as you go on. And if you get to the point in that stage of growth where competing on price becomes something that you want to do, and I would suggest that if you're a growing business, forget about competing on price. When you're growing, profit is the oxygen that enables you to reinvest. But once you get to that level, if you want to play that kind of game with your competitors, then playing on price, if you want to go down that, is something you could potentially do if your model has it become more profitable as you're going on. Cool. I want to just cover off on a few things before I sort of get to the action plan side of things. And there are a lot of myths that get spoken about when it comes to pricing and pricing psychology and transitions and all this sort of stuff. And they're often just not true. And I wanted to share what these myths are, and I wanted to present the idea that why they're not always serving. And a lot of these are because pricing is an emotional thing. It has all those impacts of, if you get your pricing right, it changes everything in your business, but also pricing it tends to bring up all these feelings of being linked to the way you've always done things, but also, self-worth and value and all the rest of it. And often I think we get this idea that clients think deeply about what they're paying. And in truth, the work that you do on pricing will be by magnitudes of 100 more than clients ever think about it. And I think understanding how small a part price actually is in the decision-making process, I think is useful. One of my key things I always like to get across is this idea that a pricing model is just about working out what it costs you to do things and adding a margin. Again, I spoke at the beginning about there's certain ways of doing pricing that just when I see them, I go, they've got you 40 or 50 or 60% of the way there, and this is one of them. For me, when you've got a model that is just, okay, this is what it cost me, and then I'm going to put my margin on it, you've got a model that is essentially just rewarding you for the hours you work. The truth is, pricing is about value. The reason why clients engage with you is because the value you're going to create for them. And my view is that whilst the basis of your pricing model is always going to be time plus cost plus margin, there has to be an element in there that recognizes that it's not just about the hours you put in. It's about the fact that you have made this your calling. It's about what you know. It's about the education you do on an ongoing basis. It's the fact that you care, and the fact that you have a team behind you, and you understand the financial products, and you understand the strategies, and you know what's right and what's wrong, and you can put your emotions to one side and help people make the right decision. And ultimately, if you get this right, at the end of it all, they're going to come back and look on this and go, I'm so glad I did that. Not because of that you delivered X reviews over a period of time, or because of that newsletter you said, whatever it might be. They're going to say thank you because of where you and your advice enable them to get. So I think always understand that if you are just charging your minimum fees, you will only ever be remunerated based on the hours you work. And for me, one of the most important things is to build a business that rewards you for what you do, the outcomes you create, and what you've put into it over the years, rather than just paying you an hourly rate. So again, pricing for me is value. And if there's not a value component in the way that you price what you do, absolutely take some time and go back to basics on that. One of the things that used to be around actually a lot is you get set pricing, right? You have, what do you charge for fees? What do you charge for advice? 4,000. Everybody gets 4,000, and we've only got one service model. It's this, and that's the most reliable, or it's the simplest. The truth is that there was a time where that pricing used to work, and it was a time when commissions were around, frankly, because commissions, interestingly, were one of the most, when done well, when not abused, and when sort of managed by people who really cared for their clients and worked for their clients, was a really egalitarian way of doing it. You know, I could work with an advisor and they would get a commission. And when I needed help, I would put up my hand, can I get some help? And then that work would be subsidized by the group. And then again, for a whole bunch of reasons, we took that apart and replaced it with something else. That's not to say it wasn't flawed, but I'm just to say that there were benefits of it, which weren't always recognized. Set pricing is easy. Set pricing can be reliable, but it's only reliable when the advice you're providing is the same. If you have every client coming in and, you know, give or take 10%, the timing is the same and the advice is the same, absolutely. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you have set pricing is typically you are going to have profit centers and you're going to have profit holes in your business. And if you're unaware of how to balance those and they're not balanced, ultimately, you're going to get yourself into an issue, which is usually about capacity, or 90% of the time, it's usually about not having the resources, working too hard, and all the rest of it. Hence the reason pricing is a bit of a gateway thing. This is a big one I want to attack. When I do the pricing and I create the model and we launch it, invariably we get to a point where we go, oh, we're ready to transition. And one of whether it's stated or whether it's unstated or whether it's, you know, recognized, one of the fears that some advisors have and practice owners have is that transitioning is going to lead to clients leaving. The reality in the vast majority of transitions, most businesses lose less than 2% of the clients they transition, if any. In other words, if you transition 100 clients and you hit the average, you will lose 2 clients at most. And to be really, really frank, most of the clients that practices tend to lose as part of this process are ones that weren't engaged, or alternatively, they didn't really get on with. I mentioned the example of James from Millhaven, classic case. James transitioned, I think, 107 clients, lost 5 of them, and every single one of those clients met his definition of didn't really get on with. And in actual fact, he actually, before we did it, he segregated his clients into love working with them, like working with them, don't like, and all of those 5 clients who love were don't like. Here's another model, actually, and I sometimes whip this out, which kind of shows you how little risk is involved. Now, there is a flaw in this model, which is it assumes that all costs in the business are variable costs. But for the purpose of what we're saying, it's useful. This is a great saying I love, which is all models are wrong, some models are useful. And I'd take it and say, if you had 100 clients who needed transition and the current fee they're paying is 3,000, and you're going to increase the profit margin is 30%, which gives you a total revenue of 300,000, profit of 90,000. Let's say you increase all of those fees across the board. which means your new average fee is 3,900. And you sit down with all of those clients, you say, I'm increasing your fees by 30%. In order for you to lose, before your revenue drops off, you would have to lose almost a quarter of your clients for you to have any fall in revenue. In other words, you could lose 23 clients from that 100, have 77 clients, and you would still have the same revenue you had before, still have $300,000 revenue. And more importantly, for your profit to fall, again, we're making the assumption it's all variable, you'd have to lose half your client base. And the interesting thing is when you put these numbers in front of a practice, what usually comes out is they go, you know what? I wouldn't mind having 25% less clients than I've got now and having the same revenue. And that's the point. The risk of not getting your pricing right, the risk of sticking with a model that is sub-profitable in certain areas, or just sticking with undercharging because you're concerned that it's going to negatively impact your business. It's an assumption that can very quickly be I can just reset it for you. It's not an issue. When you transition, in most cases, in 98% of cases or more, clients stick around. And there's a whole bunch of psychology around that, which I won't get into. I love attacking this one. When I was a consultant starting out, there was another consultant I worked with. His name was Jeff. Jeff had been doing it for so long. I think he used to be an AFL player. And we used to have these great conversations. And I remember one time we're having a conversation about pricing. And he said to me, do you think fee sensitivity exists? And I thought about it. I was like, yeah, of course, fee sensitivity exists. People make decisions based on, oh, that's too much. And he looked at me and said, no, you're wrong. It's never fee sensitivity. It's all value sensitivity. And me being the contrarian that I am, I was like, he's wrong. I'm going to find evidence. And I was looking into psychology around it. I was like, fee sensitivity exists. And the more and more I looked into it, the more I realized that it doesn't. There is no such thing as fee sensitivity. It is always value sensitivity. And it's interesting because when you ask people, do you think the problem in the world today is that people don't spend their money on the right things? Or sorry, they do spend their money, they do make good buying decisions? Or do you think the biggest problem in the world is they don't make good buying decisions? I think most people would say one of the biggest problems people have is they spend their money on things they don't need, don't want, don't make sense for a whole bunch of reasons to do with the limbic system and the neocortex. And it's true. In actual fact, if you took away the whole impulse purchase and all of these things that people spend their money on based on unsound principles, a lot of the financial problems we have would go away. And I think when you understand this, and you understand that clients will spend money on things as long as they can see there are things they want or are going to benefit them, it changes the way you view fees. And I say to people, when you master the process of presenting your fees and talking to clients in a certain way about their goals and objectives and helping demonstrate to them that doing certain things which are good for them are going to help them in the long run and bring that benefit forward, so they can feel it and they get the motivation to act on it, you're doing them a favor. But interestingly, you can use many of the same techniques that people apply to make people make poor decisions, but you're applying them for good. So again, getting this idea that it's never about the fee, it's always about the value. And as a result, looking not as presenting fees as not being just about putting the number on the table, but how you present what you do, how you present the benefit to the clients, and the way you engage new clients, the way you can clients on an ongoing basis is the key to unlocking this. Two more, and then we'll get to the action piece. One of the perceptions or myths that's flying around that most people can't afford advice. I see it all the time. You see it in the press, advice is unaffordable. The truth is that most advisors, when I sit down and I attack this assumption, and I can pull it apart, I can demonstrate to most advisors how they add 10 times the value over the lifetime of the relationship with the client than the fees charged. It's really simple to do. In fact, I say most advisors actually, particularly those that are undercharging, when you unpack it, you realize that they add 20 times the value. In other words, the outcome to the client in terms of the gap that they're helping solve between where they would be without advice and where they will be if they do the things that they need to do and make the decisions over time, most advisors can actually get to a point where they're close to 20x the value. And I think if I sat down with you and said, if you give me $100 today, I will give you $2,000 at the end of it all, it makes it a very different decision. So afford, most clients can't afford. I'd probably say that most clients, if given the right guidance, the benefit to them at the end of it will more, 99% of the time, more than justifies any investment in advice. Final one, I want to take a aim at this one because During the whole commission, there was all this talk about fair value. It's got to be fair value this and fair value that. And I've got to tell you, fair value has been proven scientifically by the huge body of research into price and value and perception. It is subjective. It's a myth. Fair value is whatever people perceive it to be. Now, that's not to say that clients don't have to get value from advice. The important thing to understand is the value to people of advice to people is how it enables them to achieve certain things in life or get to a place they want to. And for me, the biggest problem is when I was sat down and watching the Royal Commission about fair value for advice is this or this or this. It's coming from people with a legal background who are linking together the fact that lawyers charge $300 an hour and the number of hours I went into work should be around this. So they go, well, you know what? We think advice takes 10 hours and it's $300 an hour. So 3,000 is fair value. And I think the perception often comes from the fact, I don't know many people who have spent a fortune on lawyers fees. And at the end of it all, they go, you know what? I'm really glad I spent that much money on legal fees. That was really fair value. And again, that's for me is one of the problems when you get people who are coming from regulation from a legal perspective without really understanding the whole body of work that exists on pricing psychology and all these motivations, let alone the industry. But that's a personal thing. But yeah, if anyone ever mentions fair value to you and you are tying your fees to an external perception of what advice should be, understand that value is always subjective. And ultimately, the benchmark for this is always the outcome that you're helping clients achieve and the process that you apply to get there. Really quickly, one of the most wonderful coaching experiences I've had. I used to work with a lady called Zrida Riffin, who ran a practice down in Canberra called ZA Wealth Creation. She's now wonderfully retired and indulging her passion for playing African drums all over the world. But I remember I was asked by IFA if I would like to nominate practices for an award, and I put forward Zrida because I really liked the way she did things. She was a very boutique practice, but the methodology she had this phenomenal way of looking into client situation and in a really holistic way, taking charge of their circumstances and using really clear hard metrics, fundamentally shifting their asset values and their ability to retire and do the things they want in a short space of time. She worked with the kind of client down in Canberra as well, where they did have resources, and that kind of structuring and getting control of these things could generate results in a really short space of time. And I remember going along to the awards ceremony, and I'll never forget the big smile on her face when she got nominated for Innovator of the Year. She was totally unexpected. It was a really strong field of competitors out there, and the look on her face of kind of shock, but also satisfaction as she went up to collect the award was something special. Then later in the evening, when she was announced as the overall winner of the whole damn night, again, you could have times that look of shock and joy for 10, and she wore it so well. But the number one reason she was able to win that award is because when they asked her to explain the values of what she did, she was able to pull out these wonderful case studies that were so detailed and showed that difference between there and there. And she was not a cheap advisor. She is not an advisor where a lawyer who was pulling in this should take 20 hours and $300 an hour would turn around and go, that's fair value. But she was able to help her clients make a shift in such a significant way. And that's why whenever I hear this term fair value, I will grab my copy of Priceless by William Poundstone and I will read the cover. The myth of fair value, proven by science and absolutely as true today as it's ever been. Cool. Hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully this has been a quick run through. For me, if you're looking at this, I would probably look at 3 areas of a pricing model, and they are the build, how you built it, how you present it, and how you transition it. In terms of looking at your build, straight off the bat, ask yourself, when was the last time you updated your fee model? If it's been more than 2 years, maybe it's time to revisit it. If you've never done it, then definitely it's time to look at it. Make sure, ask yourself the question, did I build this based on how much revenue I want and then just work down? Or did I build it from my cost plus a margin thing? Or did I do it from both? Because personally, doing top down and bottom up, that's solving a bunch of the problems that often occur when you do the bottom up or the top down. How well can you be sure about the underlying inputs, the data you put in there? You don't have to be perfect about this. You just have to get your timings to a level where you can say, I'm 80% confident that is a good reflection of what we do. If you're not sure about how long it's taking you to do things, you're not sure about some of the variations, it could be time to go in and revisit them. And similarly, if you've done it before, what's changed that might not have been priced in? Have you implemented new software? Have you got a bigger team with different people doing different things? Have you changed the way you do certain things? It might be time to go through and understand the impact that it had on your business. Presentation. If you're tracking your pipeline, this will be really easy. If you're not, it'll be a good reason for you to implement a pipeline tracking methodology. But what are your pipeline metrics telling you about your pricing? What are they telling you about how you're charging, what you're charging, how consistently you're charging, whether or not you're charging for existing clients for advice, whether you're increasing or revisiting your fees over time when you're doing reviews? How about your financials for your business, the things you input as the foundation of the whole process? When you look at the output, your accounting reports and your profit margin, are you hitting those profit benchmarks, or are you designing a pricing model that's supposed to have a 50% profit margin, but at the end of it all, you're actually only getting 15%? Are you introducing the fees at the right point in the conversation? If you're introducing them too early, you might find less people proceeding. If they're too late, you might end up doing a bunch of work and then not getting agreement for clients to work with you ongoing. And if you do think, if you've made the assumption that the fees are something that is causing a lack of adoption or conversion or any of those other things, what data have you used to make sure that you know it's actually fees? If you are looking at the transition pace, just have a look at if you haven't done analysis, it could be the time to do it, because you want to really know, do you have any high profitable clients that are subsidizing your delivery model, which you might want to transition away from over time? Are your best clients also your most profitable? That is such a good thing to do. Before you go into this, who are the clients I love? Who are the clients I think are the most profitable? Who are the clients I love working with? And make sure the clients that you think are most profitable are most profitable. The clients you love working with, make sure those are the ones that you want to attract more of them into the business. Are the clients who are drawing upon you, are they paying the same as everybody else? In other words, the people who phone up most often, the people who could be the biggest PIA factor. The people who, and that might work both ways. The clients you love working with, but you do a lot of work for, the clients, you dread the moment they call because they're panicking about something else, or make sure that if you've got anybody who you are investing more time in, or you're creating more value for, they are the ones that should be paying ideally more, unless there's a reason they're not to. And once again, if you are providing advice that is outside of scope, your existing client takes inheritance, or they want to change certain strategies, or the circumstances changes, maybe because they got divorced or they've got a new career, are you charging for the new advice outside of that scope? Or if you're absorbing it, are you sure that your profit model on an ongoing basis is enabling you to do that? If you're going down this route and you want to create your pricing model, these are the two to have a look at: building your fee model and a guide to using the fee modeler. If you want to understand a little bit more about the timing, how to present it, how to talk about it, maybe what are the best moments to introduce the conversation, how to have those transition conversations, fee confidence and psychology of pricing. And if you've designed it, you understand it, and you're ready to put it into play, launching your bulletproof fee model and transitioning other ones to go with. That's it from me. I hope this has been a useful kind of high-level overview. I hope it's given you some insight into where pricing is at right now. I hope it's helped you understand the process and the best way to approach it. And most importantly, I hope I've sort of attacked some of those myths. And if there's any that maybe were clouding your vision a little bit, or maybe you knew about already, but if it's sort of reminded you that you to do this and not do that, then that would be a very fruitful use of my time. There you have it, pricing, done and dusted. You know what? I say done and dusted, but it's not. This is the tip of the iceberg with pricing, and I hope you've taken a bit out of it. If you'd like more information, please head over to the website, ourdairy.com.au. Go to the bottom, you'll see the blog, and you can go in there and sort through all of the content that we produced about pricing in the past. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there. Hey, keep a heads up as well. We are about to relaunch our members site, and part of that we will have a free component where you can log on and get access to some of these training materials and content and supporting tools. So head over to the website, and if you can see sort of link, join our members portal, jump in there, register, and you can sort of see a bit more of what's under the bonnet. Other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this week, and keep your eyes out for our upcoming podcast. I'll speak to you soon.